Hi, this tutorial is to demonstrate how to select an ICD-10 PCS code. I'm going to be referencing the American Medical Association publication of the PCS book. There's many publishers, this just happens to be the one I have on hand. First thing we need to do, if you're not familiar with PCS, is to read the guidelines. Guidelines are printed in the front. This book, they start on page 27. This is the ICD-10 PCS official guidelines for coding and reporting for this year. We'll give you all the instructions and details. We're not going to run through those for the purposes of this video, but wanted to reference those. The PCS book has specific sections to it. First were those black and white pages which had the guidelines. Next we have an index, which is like an alphabetical listing of all PCS codes. We have tables, which are the colorful sections of the book. At the very back of the book we have some appendices that are extremely helpful. Particularly is the appendix referencing root operations. In previous publications this was Appendix A. This year that's been put into Appendix B. What it does is lists all of the root operations, their definitions, and provide examples. There's several different root operations. So two that I could point out for this video are an excision versus a resection. These often get confused. An excision is defined as cutting out or off without replacement a portion of a body part, versus if we jump across the page to R, resection, there it focuses now, is cutting out or off without replacement all of a body part. The only difference between those is what an excision was a portion versus a resection is taking out the whole body part. So if you ever don't know what a root operation is, turn to that appendix, root operation definitions. To really select a code, we have to start with the root operation. Now, if you're looking up a surgery that you don't know what the root operation is, sometimes the appendix will give you some tips. For example, an appendectomy, when you're taking out the appendix. If you look in the index and look up the word appendectomy, we're going to see some instructions that we could either reference an excision of an appendectomy, which is 0DBJ, or we could see resection of the appendectomy, which is 0DTJ. So depending on if they're taking out a portion of that body part, that would be an excision, versus if they're taking out the whole thing, that would be a resection. So let's pretend that we're doing a resection of the appendix. Right here it tells us the first four characters are 0DTJ. For practice, you could also look up the word resection and then find the subterm appendix as well. And it will give you sometimes some additional options to choose from. Other times it will give you that same information, 0TJ. It's great to write this down or remember it, because the next step we're going to do is turn to the tables. These tables are all listed in numbers and letters. So you just have to know your alphabet and your numbers to find the right section. I've tabulated this one. What we need to do is find the table that starts off with 0DT, which is right here. 0 stands for medical surgical, D is the gastrointestinal system, and T is a resection. It gives us this nice reminder defining what it is. Once we find this table, what we need to do is find our fourth character. We determined that J represented the appendix, and you can verify that here. So we need to stay in this row and go across the page to fill in our other codes. As an example, if we go to this other side of the page, you'll notice that this code has 2 rows. So when we're building a code, you can't choose a letter from here and jump up here and then jump back down here. We've got to stay in that same row to build the code. So back to doing a resection of the appendix, what we're choosing as our 5th character, they can either do this openly, 0 would be the approach, That's if they're completely opening the patient up to expose the site. Percutaneous endoscopic is if they're making a smaller incision and using an instrument to reach the site. Bilateral opening is going through a natural or an artificial opening, or they can also use a scope with that approach. So let's pretend they did an appendectomy through the abdomen openly. So our codes so far would be 0, D, T, J, 0. Then we're going to choose our device. There's no option here, so we choose Z. And the qualifier, there's no option there either, Z. Every PCS code should have 7 characters total. So for an open appendectomy, the code should be 0, D, T, J, 0, Z, Z. So that's a basic approach of how to select PCS code. Of course, there's more scenarios that get more complex than that, but hopefully that gives you a good visual of how to use the book.